Okay, good morning. So we're up to Reheating Gimel Hey. Reheating Gimel Hey. Mutza says the Mechaber, Mutza loses al pi kaderas chamin b'Shabbos, tavshil shenis bashel me'erev Shabbos kol tzorchei. You're allowed to put on top of a pot, of a hot pot on Shabbos, some food which has been fully cooked. Kagoin pandish v'chayetzi bohen. So pandish it's a famous halach in Shinyut Ches. It's basically meatloaf. You've got pastry and you've got meat inside, and the discussion there is the rotav. You're heating up the liquid and the solid, but it's like a meatloaf, which is ultimately solid, but it's got this sort of meat or something inside. So you're allowed to put that on top of a pot which is on the fire. That's not the way you cook things. You don't cook things by putting it on top of a pot. But to sort of hide them or to insulate them underneath clothes material which is on top of the mechem, that's a problem of hatzmona. That we'll get in more detail in Reish and Zayin and Hashem. But that's the main thing. Let's do the Mishnah Berurah till just on the Mechaber, and then we'll go back to the Ramah. So says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Pei Hey. You're allowed to put al pi kaderas chamin. Says the Mishnah Berurah afidu hiomedes aloish. Very interesting. So imagine you've got a big pot of chicken soup, and you want to warm up your meatloaf or something like that. So to put it on top of the chicken soup, you've got a lid on the chicken soup, and to put it on top of that, even if the chicken soup or whatever is on the eish, that would be okay, so long as the Mechaber says that it's nispashal me'er Shabbos kol tzarka. So long as this thing that you're putting on top of it is fully cooked. Da. Now this is very interesting. Da. The das harashba, the dover shekvan nispashal, that once something is cooked, afilun nitztanin achkach legamre, even though it's totally cold. So you've got your meatloaf, you cooked it on Wednesday or Thursday, and now you want to put it on top of the chicken soup pot, even though right now it's totally cold, you take it out of the fridge, then no problem. Sules be'mishum bishul, afilu dover sheyesh beroitev, even if that thing which you're heating up has got liquid in it. Avla Shulchan Aruch sosum lekaman b'simin shinyut ches yitalad kadas harosh shesover the bedover sheyesh be'morok, that when it comes, if it's got a liquid in it, soup or something like that, and it's done if it's cooled down now, when it comes to liquids, you can't heat them up and put them on top of the pot if it will heat up.
So is the difference between roitav and morog?
He swaps between the two. Morog we understand only as soup. It's much, yeah. We're going to discuss the degrees of liquid we're talking about. Sometimes, for example, if you've got to imagine like a tray of chicken, and it's got little globules of fat on it, and then you put it on top of the chicken soup on the thing to heat up, so you're going to get a little pool of gravy. So we'll talk about that because it can be absorbed back into things. So the question is how much and that's coming up. So okay, but it's well spotted. Anyway, so if you've got a chicken soup or anything, you've got simmus, you've got chulant, and it's heated, it's on the eish, and you've got the pot, and you need to put stuff on top of it. If it's pre-cooked, no problem. Says the Rashba, even if it's cold, even if it's liquid. However, the Mechaber in Shinyut Ches Dalet goes with the Rosh and says that good morning. And says Kadas Harosh Shesover the Bedover Sheyesh Be'Marok and it's done and Yesh Be'achkach Mishum Bishul. If there's liquid there, then you've got a problem. For Hacha the Pandish, and here with this Pandish, this meatloaf, whatever you want to call it, to Mekel HaShulchan Aruch Lechamon. The Shulchan Aruch is Mekel and allows you to heat it up. Even if it gets the Yatzaledis by Mishum Dudover She'en Bereitev, because this meatloaf hasn't got any liquid. It's some sort of mezona, some sort of bread which has got meat inside. And therefore there's no concerns of bishul when you're warming it up on top of this pot. Why is that allowed? Because this is not the way you cook. This is not the way you cook. Says Mishnah Berurah Pei Zayin Ratzalema the after Kaimelon she also litin lechatchila b'Shabbos alakira. even though we said lechatchila, you're not allowed to do a nesina lechatchila on the oven. You can't put something, even if it's already cooked, put it on the oven. Even if the oven is grufa v'ktuma, because that it looks like you're cooking. The derech bishul b'kach, because you do put things in the kira, on top of the kira. Aval hacha ein derech bishul b'kach. But here, when you put the food item on top of the pot, that's not how you cook. Alidei hefse kader, through a pot in between. Ve'ein nireka mevashal, therefore it doesn't look like cooking. V'im yesh ba harbe shemen shenikrash. If, however, there's lots of oil which congealed, then yesh lahach mishum noiled. This is your point, surely. That yesh lahach mishum noiled, because you're basically changing the sort of the chorus, the liquid, the solid, solidified oil, fat, or whatever, into liquid, and you've got a problem of noilad shenimoyach hashumon, because the oil sort of now melts, the fats melt. Okay, so just to summarize what we're saying, you've got a pot which is on the flame. It can be mamish al ha'esh, and you've got the lid on the pot, and you want to warm something up. You are allowed, says the Mechaber, to take a food item which is fully cooked and to put it on top of the pot. We said you can't do nesina lechatchila. This is ein derech bishul b'kach. This is not how you cook things, and therefore there's no problem. The Rashba says that even if it's liquid, so you want to take a chicken soup and you want to rest it on top of a chulam pot or something and warm it up that way, he would say it's okay. However, the Shulchan Aruch paskins like the Rosh and says that solids, yes, but not liquids. And that's how we know here. That's why we take things, we put on top of the urn, we put it on top of the chulam pot, we put it on top of pots on the thing. That's no problem, so long as it's fully cooked beforehand. You're not cooking it now. And it's got to be, like we said, it's got to be really solid. Okay, there's two very interesting footnotes here. Look at 109. Yeah, now, what about a hot plate? This is a big one. What about a hot plate? So if you look at 109, can you put things just straight onto the hot plate on Shabbos? So you've got this meatloaf type of thing. Can you put it straight on? So in 109, he says, Platza chashmolis, a hot plate, Kosev Hagon Shlem Zaman Arbach, Shedina Kakira, that it's got the din of an oven, because you can cook on it like any other form of cooking. You can't initially put it on Shabbos. You can set it, of course, before Shabbos, but you can't place it there on Shabbos directly on the hot plate. Etc. Now, what we do and what Ashkenazi practices is that we take an upturned keli. So you put an empty keli, you turn it upside down, or a silver foil container, and that's a heka. And what are you achieving with that? You're achieving this. You're achieving because it ain't derech bishul b'kach. And therefore, if you want to heat up your kegel or your whatever it is, and you want to put it on an upturned keli, which is on top of the hot plate, then no problem. In the Sephardi world, I think there's a big machlikus about it, how you do it. Some say that you can actually put it straight onto the hot plate. Some say you can't even put it on top of an upturned keli. So there's a difference of opinion. And I think also you've got to bear in mind the difference between the types of hot plates. Some hot plates, and what the Israeli ones get very, very hot, and it's more shaykh to mevashal.
Move it to the side.
Yeah, that's right. They talk about that. Yeah. And either way, so what comes out of this halacha is a very relevant halacha, and that is that you're allowed to warm something up which has been cooked already by putting on top of a pot which is even al ha'esh, so long as it's solid and not liquid. And the contemporary, in the parallel, if you like, in the hot plate, is to put it on the hot plate on top of a upturned keli on the hot plate, but not directly on the hot plate.
You wouldn't have anything on an eish on Shabbos itself.
You could do. You're right. In other words, who's going to turn it off and that sort of thing. But the truth is, eish doesn't have to literally mean eish. Eish means the heating element. The heating element. So, for example, in other words, it could be a fire, or it could be the chulam pot, the crock pot. Because that heating element, that's the same as eish. And so too on the urn, because there's a heating element in the urn, that's called eish. So if you put something on top of the urn, which we all do, that's no problem, because that's mamish this halacha.
Are any conditions the shape and size of the pot, the upturned pot?
So it's got to be recognizable that it's a kedera there. Sometimes you got like this thin tray of thin sheet of metal, then sometimes it's not so nikar that it's on top of a kadera. So it's got to be recognizable, the chayr, that it's a kadera. Okay, now then, the shaila is also, I'll tell you where this is very nogea. Shabbos lunch. Let's say you got some chicken left over on Friday night and you want to heat it up to have it, your chicken should be a bit warm, it shouldn't be cold chicken. So what do? You want to take the leftover chicken, which is in a silver foil container, and you want to put it on top of the urn. So we've said that if it's solid, no problem. It's all pre-cooked, so there's no problem. But if it's solid, you can. But if it's liquid, then it's a problem. But in the case of the chicken, you've got little globules of gravy. Yeah, you can eat the congealed gravy.
You said yesterday you're also worried about this. The thing will become.
No, but this is so you put it on top of the urn. So you've got even if you put a silver foil, you put a silver foil, the aluminum thing, and then you put that silver foil container on top of that. So there's no worries about basar v'chol or anything like that. So the shaila is, what about the gravy that's going to become? So how much globules of fat are you worried about? That's really the question. So if you look at number 110, he says, if there's only a little bit of fat, when the fat melts, it will be absorbed into the food, and it won't be like a whole pool of gravy, which is very recognizable. That's okay. It's not sort of readily apparent on its own. Since it just melts by itself, so it's hard to quantify it, but if it's a little bit of gravy which is going to be absorbed back into the thing and it's not so recognizable, they're just like little spots of liquid here and there, then lechor it's okay. I remember asking Rabbi Shmuel this question and he told me the same thing. This is where he gets it from, but he told me that. But if you've got a lot of gravy, where it's going to make a whole pool of liquid, then it's more problematic. The best thing to do, I think this is what Rabbi Shmuel told me, is to take the chicken out and just wipe off the fats, the little bits of globules of fat. And if you've got a little bit left over, then you don't have to worry about that. Okay, let's carry on. Let's just finish off the Mishnah Brura on this mechaber. This is now Peches. So this is now going on the Hatmona point, that if you've got, he says, to take your food and to insulate it by putting it under begodim, which is on the mechem, that is also. Says the Mishnah Peches, what's that?
It's not there b'shuloi.
Yeah. No, but there you've got a separate problem of Hatmona. But Chazal made a separate gezerah of insulating food, and that's the problem over here. They're covered by clothes or by cloth materials. So even if it's not on the ala ish, even if it's not moisif hevel, but it's just you're just insulating it, that's also for a separate reason of atmana. Even if it's fully cooked, and it's warm, yeah, so that will come to in Rishon and Zayin and Shem, but that's the problem. That's what the Mechaber is referring to. Okay, let's just do a bit more of the Ramah. Let's start the Ramah actually. Says the Ramah, Hagah. You can't even take your pre-cooked food and put it on top of the kira, which is gruf of ktuma. In other words, you can take it and put it on top of the pot, which is on top of the eish or on top of the heating element or whatever, but not to put it on top of the kira itself, because that is derech bishul. That's the difference. So says the Ramah again, because the only thing you can do on top of a kira is to put it back with the 5 conditions of chazar that we've spoken about. To put it initially there is a problem. But there are those who permit putting it inside an oven that you baked on Erev Shabbos, and you now finish baking, because you used it was heated up from before Shabbos. So it's in other words, says the Ramah, that to take pre-cooked food and put it on top of the kira, the kira is a problem because derech bishul bekach. putting it into an oven which is off, and using it and just warming it up because it's just got a bit of the residue heat that was used from before Shabbos, and you want to just put it there Shabbos, that the Ramah allows, so long as it's done in legamri. And v'yesh machmirin b'zeh, and some say no, just don't do it at all because it's mechzik and mevashel. Once you start using an oven, even if it's for storage, because once you're putting it there in order to sort of reheat it, just avoid that yesh machmirin b'zeh. So let's take a look at the Mishnah Berurah just up till there. Peites she'osa lahanicha v'hanocha lechatchila b'Shabbos osa, and initially placing something on the kira is osa. Afilu hu adayin reseach mitzamik v'rala, even if it's fully cooked and it's hot and it's going to deteriorate, there's a special problem of mechzek and mevashel. It looks like you're cooking. It's a maras ayin issue. Litin letoich hainu shenoisin b'Shabbos ba'boker b'toich hatanur hatavshel shenispashel b'kadesh yischamim. So the Ramah said that you can put something into an oven which was used from before Shabbos and is now off, and there's a residue heat there, and you're just warming something up. The afshe b'toich hatano v'akira kaimelon da'afilu gar v'kotzim also la'achzir de'enu muta rakal gabo hacha acha shelo hitzminu b'cham in the Shabbos rak ofu b'midrei yom. The oven is not on. You just use it from before Shabbos, and there's just a bit of residue heat. There's only a little bit of heat in the oven, and therefore there's no mechzek mavashal, because that was the whole concern. Or mashma, because we're talking about something which is fully cooked, so you're not cooking now, you're just warming it up, which is not cooking. It's ein bishlach abishal. Or mashma, the imhoya toman beichamin miberev. The mashma says that if you did it before the Shabbos, the nofesh heavily detanur, because it's where the heat is still very strong, then because that would be more mechzik and mevashel. This all goes according to the kolboy. The Ramah is more makel based on the kolboy and says that one is allowed to technically, but tov lahachmir. Okay, tzadi aleph. This is the Ramah who said b'vashlin nitztanin legamrei. Says the Mishnah Berurah, im hoya hatavshel nitztanin legamrei, because if it had totally cooled, kaimelon the yesh be'oid mishum bishul for aslan yachafilu b'tanur kazeh. Because if the item is fully cooled down, then that's more of a serious concern. The Shem Yiga Hatavshel Ad Hayad Zeledis Boy. So Yagia Hatavshel Ad Hayad Zeledis Boy, because we're worried that even in an oven which is off, it might still get to Yad Zeledis Boy from a point of cold, and that would be concerning. Tzadi Beis, let's just do the next two short seifim. Tzadi Beis, Yesh Machmirin Bezer, Taimom, to Chazar L'Toichatanu L'Olam also. There are those who machmir say you can never put in an oven because it's always mechzik and mevashel. Beinim hachayim shetanu rav or imaat, whether it's hot or even a lot of heat or a little heat. And they just said don't put in an oven or miu. So long as we're talking minimally, there's yad seledis by in the oven. Because if the oven's not on, then it hasn't got a name of an oven. So for example, I remember my brother used to play with a certain Rav's son, and the Rav's son is quite a chevra, and he would say, his parents would hide the chocolate cake on Shabbos because otherwise, by an Erev Shabbos, he was going to play there. If the kid knew where it was, there'd be none left for Shabbos. So he said, "Come, I'll show you where my mummy and daddy hide the chocolate cake." So one week it was in the washing machine. One week, so to use the oven as a cupboard, where no one looks in the oven's off. But to use it as a storage space, if the oven's off, that would be okay. He says even if it was used and there's a little bit of heat, would be okay. But that because it hasn't got a din of an oven anymore. Ein olav shem tanur shehuz klal. Okay, let's just do one more sif. Sadi gimel, sif kartan samach gimel. Sadi gimel. V'machayim kol kach tzarich lemesh imachayim tilav hachi afilu layesh machmirin shari v'chein sasam amra le'el b'sif beis kago. Okay, so just to summarize what we've said today, that you've got a pot which is even al ha'esh, and you've got a lid on the pot and you want to warm something up, that's no problem, so long as the item is pre-cooked, and it's, according to the Rashba, even if it's liquid, but we pass the Mechaber passes like the Rosh, that it's got to be solid. In terms of gravy and things like that, so long as it's not nikar, the gravy, because it's absorbed back into the food, or there's only very small amounts, we're not worried about that. And if there's Hatzmona concerns, you've got to be careful about that. Okay, Beseda, we'll leave it there.
Sure.